Hey everyone. We're looking forward to another exciting, I guess actually technically for this season will be the first episode, but another exciting webinar hosted by Phalanx. We'll be talking through mostly to our small business owners about protecting your business from cyber threats. So with that, get your questions ready, queued up towards the end, and we're going to jump ahead right into it. So obviously, there are a number of threats going into, from a small business perspective. There's as a small business owner, you're dealing with every possible hat. So of course, cybersecurity is another one of them. Often, a lot of the questions that I get is okay, well, let's be real. We're a small business. We have 5 people, or we have 10 people, or hey, I'm a solopreneur. It's just me. How much does this really matter to me? I'm barely making ends meet. I don't have enough to spend on cybersecurity. But the reality is that most small businesses actually do get hit. They report cyber attacks, and not to mention that they're actually one of the because they're so small and because resources are so tight, they're actually very lot easier to attack. Well, again, most people think, "Hey, I'm too small to be hit." But the reality is, nobody's too small or too big to be targeted. And actually, if you think about it from the perspective of the hacker and the cyber criminal, it's actually you can think about it as a sales cycle. So if you're attacking a large organization, if there's a ransom involved, you can think of it as a number of stakeholders that need to pass off on and bless off on this ransom to be paid. And so that could take a while. That could involve, dealing with cyber insurance. But hey, when it's a small business owner, they're just trying to get back on their feet. So even though ransoms are smaller, they'll get paid out faster. So unfortunately, that means that we're all needing to stay vigilant when it comes to cyber threats. So what we want to talk about today is one of the major cyber threats or cyber attacks that small businesses have to deal with. So again, every type of business deals with different types of threats and attacks to each of them, just because the more resources you have, the more sophisticated of an attack that needs to occur. But the biggest threat or vulnerability area for a small business is actually the business email compromise attacks. So what you want to think about from that perspective, because I'm moving myself around for the slides, is think about phishing. So from a phishing attack perspective, obviously you click on a phishing link, you get an email that sounds maybe too good to be true, and then you jump into it. You can think about business email compromises as the next level. So if you might have heard of spear phishing or anything like that. And that's usually when the phishing attacks are very specified. So they actually do their research. These tend to be a lot more legitimate and relevant to you as a business owner. So you're not going to necessarily come across the same, Nigerian prince scam attack as a BEC type attack, but it'll look more like a vendor who's trying to reach out about something, or more than likely a customer. Again, as small business owners, revenue is always top of mind. So they're gonna try to hit you where you're necessarily hurting the most to start. So they're very dangerous again because they're highly convincing. They spend the time and the research on your business, and again, there's no business is too small to be targeted by these kind of organizations or these kind of attackers. Excuse me. So they'll look very legit. And then so that can also look like, so if you look at phishing training, for example, oftentimes they'll say, hey, look at the URL, make sure it's legitimate. They'll spend the time to buy and create these accounts that look as legitimate as possible. So again, they spend the time and they do the research. And oftentimes they'll make themselves look like a legitimate organization, and then they can hit a lot of small businesses with that. The average BEC scam results in 125K in losses per incident. So you might think, I don't even make 125K in revenue. How can that happen? How can that be? But ultimately, if you think about just the damage that these business email compromises can create, and that includes, from an insurance standpoint. So if you have cyber insurance, yes, that'll help mitigate the cost of these attacks. But the reality is, the cyber insurance, while it can protect the monies side of the house, there's nothing you can do about your reputation. And part of a attack is you have to report to your customers. So, again, these are losses related to the actual cost of remediation, but also the cost to your business from a reputation standpoint. And then, thirdly, this is a very dangerous type of attack, because if you think about from the security tool standpoint, the security tools spend a lot of time looking to determine what a behavior of an attack looks like, or a signature of an attack looks like. Oftentimes, there's no malware involved in this kind of attack, because it is just legitimate accounts. It's just they're essentially asking you for information that you're unwittingly giving to them. So you're actually letting them log into your accounts without you knowing that. And then, so again, there's no fancy malware involved. It's that you're just essentially handing over your credentials, your passwords to log in, and they're just logging in, and that's that. So again, it's not that it is a hack, but it's also, it's not like a scary tool out there that's hacking you. It's just them logging into your account. And again, who's really getting targeted by all this? If you think about this, they try to get as close to decision makers as possible. Again, think about a sales cycle. That's exactly what's trying to happen from an attack cycle too. So small business owners, the finance personnel, if you're an HR team, they'll try to target people that have accesses to all the kind of sensitive information, or the ability to perform certain actions across the business. And then, of course, also supplier and vendors. So, if they have any kind of control over where the money is flowing, that's, who they want to involve in these kind of attacks. So instead of just saying, hey, these attacks happen, let's just call it a day, we thought it'd be great to just walk through, step by step, what does it actually look like when these attacks occur? So, excuse me. In this case, we have 5 different steps that the attacker would walk through as they conduct this attack against a small business. So the first step, like I said, is the reconnaissance. So this can be as simple as somebody looking at your LinkedIn, your website, your social media, all the things that you want your customers to do or your partners to do. Attackers are doing those as well. So you got to be careful about what kind of information is going out there. Obviously, you want to be able to put out as much helpful information as possible, again, from your customer standpoint, from your investor standpoint, your partner standpoint. But you want to make sure it is not too telling. And we'll go ahead and talk about some of the ways to mitigate and what I mean by this. But there's ways to conduct your business, get the information out there you want without exposing too much of your internal processes. So yeah, they'll go to LinkedIn, they'll go to your website, they'll go to your about us page, and they'll identify those key decision makers. They'll say, all right, this person's a CEO, so this person's a CFO. Okay, this person deals with vendor management. And they'll take all that information. So again, if they'll go to your page, they'll go to their LinkedIn page, they'll start learning about those individuals. Hey, they'll find them on Facebook, they'll learn even more. And then they'll start to put together profiles based off of who they want to attack. Then they'll, if there's a way to get in your newsletter, or if there's any ways to get on emails, they'll start to understand what is the ecosystem of this business. And again, it might seem like, hey, it's a lot of work to be done for a small business that you might get a tiny payout from, if that. But the reality is there's a lot of ability to do all this, for one, automated, but for two, it is actually not that difficult to apply the same principles across multiple small businesses, especially as it relates to the same industry. So, if they're used to targeting a certain industry, a lot of what they do will be repetitive, and it's a numbers game for them. So, it's not that difficult for them to do this kind of research per company. The next step is they'll go and then they'll start doing email spoofing, or if they can, they'll just take over the account. And again, that's account takeover isn't some fancy malware that they developed that's hacking you remotely. It's mostly just a phishing attack that you've clicked on something you shouldn't have clicked on, and they just get the passwords. Or sometimes people just use weak passwords. You'd be unfortunately surprised at how poor password management is still this day and age. So they'll, yeah, if they can take over the account and just get into the account, they'll just send through there as well. And that also includes, the unfortunate case that MFA and 2FA, the multi-factor authentication, while it's important and while you have to do it, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be protected. And we'll get into that more a little bit later. And the other is email spoofing. So this is actually one of the most frustrating. And again, we'll talk about how to mitigate this. But if you look at that example, it says at supplyco.com instead of at supplyco.com. If you look at it very carefully, they look pretty much exactly the same because of this font. And that's kind of the whole point. So one of those is a capital I, and one of those is a lowercase l. But just by looking at it visually on the slides, you would have no idea. So that's very difficult, right? Or we've actually seen personally, an email that I got personally was a request for proposals, and they wanted us to purchase a number of items. But what we found is that they had it was a school system, and then they had the district number or something in there. And then what I had to do was I went to Google that school system. So I was like, okay, well, it's weird that the supervisor for the whole school is emailing me this RFP. Looked it up, found that the emails on the website weren't matching the email that I was getting, even though the email I was getting looked very legitimate across the board in its own standalone sense. So again, we'll talk about other ways to mitigate, anything. If it smells fishy, you want to go ahead and double check everything. I ended up calling them too. So I straight up called them and said, hey, I got an email from this person. Is this a legitimate email? And they were like, not at all. So yeah, third step here is they'll send a very carefully crafted email. So, and often there's some urgency involved. So the one that I received in that case, the urgency was, hey, we're sourcing a bunch of proposals, and by this deadline, and then so we can decide who we want to choose for this contract. And we found you via small business website, the SBA website. So that was, from our perspective, it was like, okay, like, we want to put in, we want to win this business. So that's kind of where it started. And then obviously it was very clear after that, after doing some digging, that it was not a legitimate RFP. But let's say we just kept going forward. They would say, hey, you guys won, you won, this is great. Here's the invoice, like, go ahead and pay this, send us the material, send us a payment, or some sort of way to get extract the money or resources out of us, so that it could be, hey, here's updated payment info for the month. Often we'll see CEO fraud. Actually, this is a hilarious case as well. So so this is the CEO fraud is like, hey, can you wire X amount of money, $10,000 to the vendor, like, now? Another case that was I came across was for a volunteer organization that I do, just a local community effort, and I would get an email from the quote unquote president that said, hey, can you buy these Apple gift cards and then send me the codes so I can send them to somebody. But the hilarious part was we were a tiny organization, for one. For two, he lived in the next building over because it was a community volunteering thing. So I was like, hey, I played with the guy, but I played with the scammer, but I was like, hey, we meet, blah, blah, blah. I just saw you and you didn't mention anything about Apple gift cards. And then unsurprisingly did not get a response back from the scammer. But at larger organizations, especially if you hit maybe a more junior person on that still has the ability to send some money, some damage can be done here. They go, hey, I'm not going to question the CEO. I'm just going to do it. So part of that is policies, part of that's training. So again, a payroll, it's like, hey, update my direct deposit details. And that could be, as a scammer gets into that. So let's go back to our steps here. The scammer has officially targeted somebody. They took over their account. Let's say they actually got their password in, and so they got their corporate account, and then they sent it to HR. Hey, can you update my direct deposit details to this other bank account? But I need to do it by XY day because there's something that's going on, and I need my next paycheck to go there. So if someone goes through that without any kind of validation, then the reality is like, oops, there goes the money. And again, there's always pressure attached. So anytime you get something that feels sketchy and makes you feel like they're trying to make you do something, then that's where you got to take a step back and be, take a breath and be like, okay, if I don't do this today, for one, what really happens? But for two, like, am I feeling that pressure because they're putting the pressure on, or am I feeling the pressure because there's real time pressure from something that I know is a thing? And then step 4 here, of course, if the victim is feeling that pressure, they go ahead and comply, and they go, okay, I need to do the thing. So they transfer the money, they make the change or whatever. The attacker gets their money, and then boom, they're gone. So last step, discovery, right? So like if it's a payment thing, hey, the vendor's like, hey, I never got paid, or that person, the employee's like, hey, I never got paid. Or you fulfill a contract, send some stuff over, and you're like, hey, where's the money? And then that person's like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. That's usually when the business realizes, I got scammed. This is a fake account, fake something. Issue then, being like, what do we do about it? And often the scammer's gone, those accounts are closed. Like there's not much you can do. And then for this point as well, a lot of people say, when I get hacked, this or that, or I'll know what to do. But the problem is the flash to bang. So from the point of getting attacked, getting the account takeovers, and the point of figuring out, even at larger companies, can be like a 9-month turnaround. So there's often there, attackers will get access to these accounts first, even when they don't know what they're going to do with them yet. So sometimes they sell that access to, it's like, hey, they got a bunch of email accounts. They're going to sell that to someone else. Again, if you think about everything about these cyber criminals, it's there's a whole nother marketplace similar to a legitimate one, but for criminals, right? So some people are the people who gain the email access. Some people are the people who set up these shell companies. Some people are the people that do the execution. So there's in addition to just single people or single organizations doing everything, a lot of times they'll just do parts of it and they'll sell it to other people who do different parts of it. And it's a whole chain of criminals, which also makes it more difficult to go figure out what happened to your money. So what you're here for is, how do you actually protect your business against these kinds of attacks? So for one, again, verify before you trust. You know what? There's never been a customer or a vendor that I know of that when you say like, hey, I need to do a little bit more verification, that they're annoyed, right? Because I know from their perspective, they're like, oh, that's actually smart. Like, thanks for confirming via email and via phone. And you can make that a policy for your business too, right? So obviously you don't want to make friction in your revenue generation processes, but when there's, especially if it's a large amount of money that's being transferred, it's always good to do some extra verification. And, oftentimes as you start interacting with other businesses, if you haven't already seen it, you'll see that kind of multi-factor authentication, essentially approvals for any kind of money transfer. So it's like, hey, in addition to emails, there's a phone call associated with it. So again, and ideally, if you don't already know them, so if you don't already trust them, try to find a phone number via a different source. So if you do everything out of the email that they sent you, all that could be fake. Going back to my example, I went and Googled that organization. I found the website via Google. And then I went there, saw that the emails and the phone numbers were different, and then called the numbers off the one I found off of Google. So again, it's not foolproof. Maybe they spent a lot of time and effort and have a high SEO ranked scam website. You never know, but there's a less of a chance of that. That's going into the threshold of more effort than is worth the payout. But that being said, the higher the payout, the more effort is going to be worth. And don't assume that things like that are out of scope of the possible. Everything is technically within scope. So it's just, you want to try to de-risk as much as possible. So if it's a low amount of money and there's a low amount of risk involved, so you might not do a lot. If it's a high lot of money, there's a high lot of risk, then it's like, hey, maybe it's worth doing a couple more efforts. Excuse me. So second up here is email security best practices. So for one, if your email, if you haven't implemented DMARC, SPF, DKM, and if you don't know what that is, contact us. We'll go ahead and help you out there, sort you out with these. But it's really a quick, easy Google search. There at this point, there's kind of no excuse not to have this stuff all set up. It's all very simple. It's all through your email. Ideally, you're using not just a Gmail, but a business email. All of this can be set up, and that'll prevent your email spoofing. Secondly, if you have a business email account and you're able to set up flags for external emails, often you'll see that for larger organizations where, especially if you email them, they respond an email back to you, you'll see in the history that the email to them, when they opened it, said, this email is from outside your organization. So that'll help from those internal to internal. Again, don't assume that just because something is slightly off, that internal people will realize. They're so used to working with coworkers or whatever, that there's a chance that again that it's spoofed to look just close enough so that people don't ask questions and they just respond. And of course, MFA, multi-factor authentication, that helps a lot. So the more you can essentially prove, because what you want to do is, from an identity perspective, is prove that the person accessing the resource is the person that they say they are. So it used to be, if like something like a password was good enough. But the problem is, if me here versus someone else halfway across the world could potentially know the same password in terms of, have access to that knowledge. So you want to have another piece of authentication to help with that. So that could be a text message to your phone. So it's like, hey, it's your phone number. Hey, I have possession of my phone. That should be, that could be good too. Of course, there are SIM copying type scams as well. So that's not perfect. Using a secondary email, again, like you're just adding layers of difficulty, but not, some of them are better than others. So a secondary email could be good, but also they could hack that email. So some of the better ones are, like biometrics related. Like if you have a fingerprint reader on your laptop, or hardware keys. So you might see like YubiKeys or other hardware security, essentially, or hardware that you can add to your computer as authentication. So you'll have like a little USB that you'll have to physically plug into your computer, and then that'll count as the other authentication. So you can't log in until that specific piece of hardware is plugged into the computer. So it's annoying, so high annoyingness, but the highest way to prove that you are who you are, right, is that the physical thing needs to exist. So third is training and awareness. So this is a little bit squishy in terms of, it's preventative. It's not gonna stop anything, but honestly, you'll be amazed at how much training and awareness actually helps. So the more, and people might find it like, oh, it's annoying, but honestly, I've found that the more that people are joking about how easy the training is, that's actually when it sets in, because they'll see a phishing email and they'll be like, oh, that actually is a phishing email, let me forward it to IT. So you want to train people, right? Because like the human link is the weakest link when it comes to getting hacked. So again, it's, people want to believe that it's all these fancy fancy tools and all this $1 million malware that's causing all this havoc. But the reality is, it's just people unknowingly just handing over their information because they didn't realize it. So educate people on again, urgency, or anything that's urgent. Like the number one training is to have people just take a step back. And honestly, if it's like hyper urgent, make sure they get another human in the loop there, because when there's urgency, that's where the danger is. So you want to make sure there's as many eyes on as possible. Obviously, unusual sender details, slight spelling errors, anything that looks a little off, or these days slightly too formal, right? So if the attacker is using AI to generate these phishing emails, it might come across a little bit more formal than that you would expect from a vendor, let's say. So all that is good to train people on. And then second is just simulation. So the best kind of training is to actually get in there and see it. So if you can run phishing simulations, there's plenty of tools and services for that. Again, if anyone needs help with that, reach out to me. I'll square away on that. But there's tons of ways to run simulations, to test, to have your employees, without again telling them, hey, this is a phishing simulation. Have it just go out every once in a while and see who bites. And then for those who do, run some remediations. And honestly, often people are surprised at how much they got caught. Because again, when you're looking for it, it's easy to catch. But they get you when you're not looking for it. It's usually, if you're energized, just got your coffee, you're looking out for phishing emails, you're going to catch it 99% of the time. The problem is they hit you when you're tired, end of a busy day, busy with a bunch of meetings. And the last thing you need is this one thing that just came through and like, okay, let me just click through it and just get the thing over with. And oops, just got phished. Fourth, again, a little squishy, but it goes into another way to protect is policies, procedures, processes. So being able to set a policy saying, hey, if it's over X amount of dollars, let's say over $1,000, we're going to set our risk to that. So if it's less than $1,000, we're going to let people just be able to do what they got to do, and we'll accept the risk that we might get phished, or there might be some fraud in there that will slip through the cracks. It set it over $1,000 or whatever, then it's like, okay, now we need to have another human in the loop to confirm. And again, it's like, hey, the CEO is saying, I need you to send $1,000 right now. That way that intern or whatever would be saying, okay, this is over $1,000. I need to go get a manager to confirm off of this. And then, so here's another actually interesting one that a lot of people don't think about is use a separate email for finance transactions that isn't publicly available. So again, all the emails that are on your website, just assume that attackers have access to all that, or common emails. So like, accounting at your business or invoices at your business. If you set up a different email that might be not so obvious and use that as the primary financial transaction. So if when you're dealing with your vendors or anything like that, that's the email that they know to email, but someone from the outside in wouldn't necessarily know. So last is, of course, make sure you have the ability to monitor and respond. So regularly, if on this is more on the IT side, but make sure you're reviewing all those email logs. Make sure you are responding to suspicious activity. And if you suspect a BEC attack that has been executed, make sure that you blast out to everyone and anyone that you think something happened. So whether that's contacting your credit card processor, your bank account, and if it also within the US wise, the FBI actually does take in cybercrime as a something that they track. And then so if you Google just like FBI cybercrime reporting, you would actually be able to submit information about known phishing scams or anything else, especially if you think that other people are getting hit with that. You're able to submit that to them, and then they'll do what they do with that information. So next, we're going to jump into some more practical, cybersecurity steps. We did just talk about a number of things you can do about BECs. But let's just jump into a couple more things that you can do to help protect your business. And again, you're never too small to be attacked. And honestly, the more you start looking out for it, the more you'll see. And any business has been around, no matter how small, for any amount of time, you're just going to start getting these scam emails, because the attackers also, if you're doing a good job and make yourself look like a larger company, that's all they see. So they assume you're a larger company. So here, starting off with business email. Again, we talked through the biggest threat there to many small businesses, the BEC, and that starts with the BE part of the business email compromise. So ideally, again, try getting a business account, business email that'll allow you to add some additional security protocols, and just ways that it's much more difficult to spoof an email from a business that it has an active business URL that they're using. When you're using it just like a free service, like a Gmail, an Outlook.com type, for one, you're missing out on a lot of the extra security measures that you can add into it. But for two, it just leaves your customers open to you get them getting hacked using your account, your business name. So again, they're looking at the ecosystem. So if you're XYZ service at gmail.com, then who's to say they won't just be XYZ service co at gmail.com and try to attack your customers or your partners, your vendors via that. And then of course the other way around. There's plenty of ways to exploit the fact that there's just a little bit more confusion as it relates to businesses that use non-business emails. Another is, again, go ahead and try to hide, and by hide I mean just don't make it public the emails related to these more sensitive financial transactions or anything. So again, kind of they'll have automated scrapers that pull every email off of your website. So as long as it's, if it's emails that are using for certain things that don't need to be on your website, then don't do it, right? You don't want to list every possible emails you have or so these non-public emails, billing at yourcompany.com, finance at your company.com, invoices, whatever. That'll help. You could also do what's called the alias trick. So for one, you could set aliases. So again, this is primarily for those that have business emails, but you can set multiple aliases for one email. And by alias, I mean you can actually have. So let's say, yours is your name at yourcompany.com. You can, in those email accounts, you can set aliases. So it's like your name at yourcompany.com, but also you can do CEO at yourcompany.com and finance at or info at hello at. But those will all be set to your email. So it's like your email is at the end of those, but people can send to any of those 5 different emails and it goes to yours. So you can also do, especially for Gmails and a lot of others, a plus something. So in this case, like CEO plus banking at yourcompany.com. So this is great for when you're submitting your emails to anywhere. And this actually does work for Gmail too, or the free emails as well. So let's say you're signing up for a newsletter, or you got to sign up for some lead capture form to get some information. You could do your name, your email plus and then that website name at yourcompany.com. And then that way, when you're getting emails, either things that shouldn't be going to that website, your name plus that website.com, you'll know that your email was hacked from that or leaked from that website. And again, this works great for even on a personal level. If you're signing up for Target or whatever, Target.com, you could do your name plus Target at gmail.com. And if Target gets, leaks out again, you'll know as you receive these emails, or even, even if it's legitimate, just from a spam perspective or marketing email perspective, you can see, kind of where those emails are coming from. Last is disposable emails for external signups, kind of, again, going to external signups. Depending on every time you give your email, that's going into a database, and you're at the, that emails, it depends on how they're protecting it. So either it's very protected, either it's not. So you can use the aliases, you can use temporary emails, but just pretty much consider every time you put your email out there, who's actually receiving that email. Going into our password and access security. So again, you've probably heard this a million times, but MFA, 2FA, make sure you do implement that a lot. Oftentimes it's not, and it's becoming better now, but oftentimes it's not default. So make sure you go in every SaaS application you're using, every cloud, whatever, like log in, go to settings and see if there's an MFA option and add it. So for one, as you're doing passwords, you don't have to do these crazy, hard to remember passwords. If you're thinking about it like from your own perspective, or if you're like trying to remember the password, try to do passphrases. So like blue dog sky pasta or whatever. Actual human words that we know. And what helps is that because like when a computer is doing, let's say brute force, it doesn't care if it's real words or not real words. There are attacks that are centered around dictionary words, but for the most part, if you put them together like that, especially toss in some special characters, makes it difficult to brute force while easy for you to remember. But ideally, just use a password manager. Just straight up use a password manager and generate random passwords for each one. The only thing there is make sure you do a very strong passphrase as the master password to that password manager. Otherwise, you've literally just done yourself a disservice. And then separate work and personal passwords. Again, password manager helps with this a ton, but make sure you're not reusing passwords across multiple different websites, but ideally also definitely, I would say not even ideally, just definitely across personal business. So, again, if your personal stuff has got hacked because there's less security related to it, they're going to take those credentials and they're going to try that against all your corporate stuff. And if you're using the same across both or similar, like that's just going to work, and that's not great. Going back to MFA. So again, the more you can use an authenticator app. So there's free ones out there like Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. I think Duo, you can use it for free as well. The better. So like those ones are designed to generate those key codes. It also helps because you don't have to get a million different text messages. But it's way better than the SMS base, because a lot of times, for one, they can SIM swap your phone, but for two, they'll like spam it. And then so a lot of times people will get these notifications and they'll just swipe away, say yes or whatever. So it's like the more you can use the authenticator apps, the better. And again, I was mentioning hardware keys, but that's probably one of the best. But most businesses are not going to do it because it's annoying. But if you really want to lock your stuff down, I would highly suggest hardware key. And then so one thing to go see is if your passwords are out in the wild. There's been a number of breaches, on the news every other day. You hear about a breach. If you go to haveibeenpwned.com and type in your stuff, it'll see if your email showed up in any of the known breaches. Because if that's the case, there's a high chance your passwords got leaked with that. And then so for sure, make sure you change those passwords ASAP. All right. So one of the other things that you want to think about is from a business email compromise standpoint. A lot of times one of the challenges is that people are actually using their email in a way as a file storage. So if you think about all the attachments, people will go back and search for those emails with those attachments without having moved them somewhere else. And guess what? If a hacker gets into those email accounts, that's exactly what they're doing. They're seeing what all those attachments are, and they're able. That's probably the easiest way to offload data as possible is that they already have access just to download those attachments. So if you're using, if you're just relying on email to send those important documents or contracts, invoices, employee records, whatever, email is probably one of the worst ways you could do it. Like, yes, it's fast, but again, if you're using your email as a shadow file storage, that's just, you're just going to wait until somebody's able to offload that. Because those attachments will be there forever then. I mean, not necessarily to delete it, but if you're not hitting your limit and it's just, you have years and years worth of attachments, anyone can jump in there and just offload all of those things. Not to mention, there's just no visibility. So, if you're sending someone just a file and an attachment, you have no idea if they opened it. You don't know who opened it. You don't know if they downloaded it. You just kind of shipped it out. And guess what? That file attached to that email is sitting in their email now forever. So now there's two places where that sensitive data, if it's sensitive, lives, and it can live for who knows how long. And that's two different emails that if either of them get hacked, that data is out there. So again, from an attacker's perspective, or from a small business owner perspective, or a defensive person's perspective, those emails can represent a lot of risk, and more risk than you really need for your business. So you want to make sure you're just using other ways to send those files, especially if they have any kind of sensitivity. So going into the next point here, how to send and receive files securely. um, so there's a lot of different ways. We're obviously we're going to mention Sentinel because hey, that's what we do. But there's more than one way to securely ensure that your stuff is out there without relying on your email. So obviously, from email perspective, if you can encrypt that email, that works. That'll help, and that'll help for future cases too. But instead of again sending emails, the files in the emails, try using some sort of secure file sharing service. Again, if you need it from if you're looking for one, if you're looking for a free one at the start, SendTurtle is a great place to start. You can sends the links, right? So that way, when those links expire, the access to that data goes away. But say, even from another perspective, if you want to use, let's say, Google Drive to create a link, same thing there. You can do that. The only difference is from that perspective is if in Google Drive, you got to go back and make sure you expire your links yourself or pull off that access, or else it's the same problem as if it was an email attachment. If that link stays live forever, then as soon as someone gets in that email, then they get access to that data forever. Not to mention, when you're looking at systems, make sure that they do have that access log. So access log and expiration dates are probably the two strongest things you can do to protect that data as you're sending and receiving it. So you want to know who's accessing what. Ideally, you want to know when and how many times. And you want to set, automatically, or you want to set, ideally, it's automatically expiration dates for all those files so that again, you can just set it and forget it, and you don't have to worry about 5 years from now somebody accessing a data link that they shouldn't have. So again, and another thing too, it's like, hey, if it's a file attachment on email and you send it out, if they forward that, if they download it and send it out, you have no control over that data anymore when it's just in an email attachment. So again, requiring any way you can require identity verification. So sometimes that can look like if you do send an email attachment, if you encrypt or lock your file before you send it, that will help. But again, of course, you have to then figure out how to send the password to them. So there's essentially the things you do to protect your email account. You want to do to protect your files and attachments as you're sending and receiving it to and from, because again, unless you have confirmation, it's harder to control all that. And then last is just always keep track of, if those credentials have been leaked. You want to make sure that things are protected, things have multiple gates to get there. Excuse me. And then that way, it's never too easy for someone to access data that they shouldn't have. So again, you know what? Set it and forget it. Is small business owners, got too much going on, right? The last thing you need to do is try to keep track of every little file that's going across your business. So set it and forget it is the best way to go about it. So again, if you're using any kind of file sharing platform, that'll likely, again, there's different versions out there. Most of them have some sort of automation in there to help you out. You want to make sure the access logs are there. So again, you can see who's doing what, where. Again, there's different versions of how that exists across different platforms. Setting automatic file expiration dates. Again, different versions of that exist. But that, again, if you want to do this in Google Drive, you can do it. Just make the link, send it out, and then set a calendar invite to yourself saying on this date I will expire this link. It's more manual, but hey, there's different ways to make the same thing happen. Again, requiring identity verification, whether that's they prove that they have that they own the email that they're trying to access it from. That could be a password, that could be authentication code. A number of different ways to make it all happen. Some more automated than not, but you want to try to make sure it's happening. Keeping old files out of your inbox. So again, even if somebody's sending you an attachment, you can't do anything about what on their email inbox, but you can at least do it from your perspective. Like, hey, I downloaded, I store it somewhere safe. Or ideally, if you're using, again, a file sharing service product, then, you can send them a link that they can upload to, and that way you guys can skip the email portion altogether. But ultimately, these are all little tiny changes. Again, some of them more automated than not. All of them can be automated for sure. Again, there's a number of platforms out there. SendTurtle is one of them. But there's a number of platforms out there that you can use that have varying levels of automation. So, again, small business owner, you don't want to spend your time doing this. You want to spend your time making revenue. But if you do want to spend your time doing this, again, all this can be done manually. So don't sacrifice security just because you're busy. Just find a way to automate it, set it and forget it. Don't have to worry about it. So we're coming up on the end here of our webinar. It's been a good 45 as we planned. So want to queue up our next webinar here coming up April 3rd, Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Same place. So there's another Luma link you can sign up to. We'll be doing another YouTube Live, and this time will be more focused towards our accountants and other tax professionals, accounting professionals. Ultimately, how do you streamline client data? So, in the theme of sending sensitive information, there's a lot of, especially when you're trying to protect your reputation, protect, your business. How do you do that? And how do you do that efficiently? And how do you do that efficiently at scale? So that's what we'll talk about. Again, try to save time, things that are important to worry about. So if you're going to cut corners, what are the corners not to cut, and what are corners that are, ideally you don't cut, but hey, you can. So we're all about things, the real world. This is all trying to be as human friendly as possible. So if anyone has any questions that they have in advance that they want me to address, always reach out. I would love to bake in all that information as much as possible. So again, really appreciate everyone for coming out, watching the webinar. Again, we'll be running these over time. And again, the more interest we have in various topics, please reach out. And that way we can start adding topics for what people want to see. And other than that, of course, follow us on our YouTube account, our LinkedIn account, Facebook account, newsletters, whatever. If you want to get updates on our upcoming webinars, and of course, any other launches. And of course, if you found any of the file transfer stuff interesting, sign up for SendTurtle. We have a free account to get you started. Don't sacrifice your security. It just gets automation, and catch you at the next one. Thanks.